How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 1 of What If Deku Had a Perfect Copy Quirk. And now, let's begin. Hey, Mom, what do you think my quirk's going to be? Izuku would ask towards his mother. She would then turn towards him. That's quite the good question, Izuku. I'm not quite sure. Quirks are quite the strange thing, although I do know they get stronger as each generation passes. So, what I would say, since your father has a fire quirk and I have a telekinesis quirk, you could get a stronger one of either of them. Although quirks are quite strange, they work in mysterious ways, and you could get a completely random quirk for all we know. It has to do with just random parts, I guess. I mean, I'm not a quirk doctor after all, so why don't we hop in the car, since it is your 4th birthday after all, and you're finally allowed to go to the quirk doctor's office. Izuku would pump his fist in the air, yelling, "Yeah! I can't wait to figure out what my quirk is!" As they would drive off to the quirk doctor's office. They would then just check in before sitting down, as Izuku was hopping up and down in his seat, as he just couldn't contain himself, waiting for just to hear what his quirk was. "Mom, what do you think my quirk's going to be?" Izuku would ask very quickly, as Inko would then just facepalm. "Izuku, you've already asked this question. Please just stop drawing attention was right now. It's kind of embarrassing. Everyone's eyes are on you." As Izuku would just say, "But Mom, I can't wait to become the #1 hero," Izuku would yell, jumping up in the air, pumping his fist. "I'm gonna become the #1 hero just like All Might. I can't wait to save all those people." As Inko just sort of, yeah, sure, no, but please just sit down and calm down. You're gonna have to be calm when the doctor's taking the tests, or else we're gonna have to go home and wait till tomorrow to do it." Izuku would instantly jolt back down into his seat, looking serious as ever and completely calm. This meant the world to him, and he wasn't about to have his complete emotions take over and he couldn't take the tests. So finally, when the doctor came in, he would ask for Inko, as they would then walk over towards where the doctor was. They would go into a private room where the doctor would take some samples and some tests. He would come back 30 minutes later, looking down at a clipboard. "Although we have no clue what your child's quirk is, we do, however, know your child does have a quirk. We can't completely identify what his quirk is until he awakens it, so I would give him about a week or so until he awakens his such quirk, and that's when you can bring him back in and we'll identify it." Inko would nod her head as they would then leave back to their house. Izuku would sit back down onto the couch, watching just clips of All Might saving people and All Might talking to the news reporters, just showing off his sheer power and muscles. Izuku would idolize All Might from the very day he was born. He wanted to be like All Might so much, and so it meant the world to him if he had a strong quirk or not. So when the words left the doctor's mouth that Izuku had a quirk, he just couldn't contain himself, as he would be jumping up and down. He would then start to think, "I wonder what my quirk could possibly be. Could it be something strong or weak? Well, I guess I'll just have to wait." As Izuku would look over towards the family pet, as all of a sudden he would then start to copy the family pet's movement just completely perfectly, as the cat would take one step forward and Izuku would do the exact same. As Inka would look down at her child, who was on his hands and knees copying the family cat, as she was just confused. "Izuku, what are you doing?" As Izuku would look towards his mother, as he just felt on instinct that he should just say, "Oh, I'm copying the cat." Inko would be quite confused before she would then realize this is probably his quirk, as she would then ask Izuku if they should go into the car and go get it checked out, as they had just arrived back home and Izuku's quirk had just awakened. As Izuku would end up walking back towards the car, they would hop in, as Inko would then drive off, where they would still see the doctor in the eating room just checking off different things. As they would then arrive, the quirk doctor would then realize what had happened. I'm guessing Izuku's quirk materialized and started forming, I guess. Those aren't quite the greatest words, but yeah, Izuku's quirk just kind of came about. He started copying our cat. I'm kind of confused about it, but that's pretty much what happened. The quirk doctor would look down at Izuku, as Izuku would then look up back at the quirk doctor. "Hold on one second," as the doctor would then take a glass of water, as he would then put some water into it, as Izuku would then see this as he would then put his hand out as water would start to just spit out of his hand. Well, that's what I thought. It's quite the rare type of quirk, but your child has a copy quirk, but it just depends on what type of copy quirk there is. There's a type of quirk where you can copy the quirks just by looking at it or touching the person with the quirk, or you can have a complete perfect copy quirk. Although we've never seen it before, we've theorized that there's some people that actually have it. It's basically where you can copy the movements of anything and everything, and you can even copy quirks just by looking at it. So, after seeing this, I think Izuku might be one of the rare lucky ones that has such a thing. As the doctor would then bring it back, asking Izuku to perform things, bringing in a couple people to show Izuku their quirks, as Izuku would then be able to perfectly mimic those quirks, as the doctor would then nod his head. Yep, it's as I thought. His quirk name is Perfect Copy. Just like I said, he can copy anything and everything just by looking at it, and even quirks. He just has to see the quirk in action, after all. So, I think you have quite the powerful quirk, young Izuku. I think you'd make a great hero one day. Congratulations. Izuku would smile proudly, knowing that his quirk is going to become the best and most well-known quirk in the world, as he couldn't wait to become the #1 hero after all. As Izuku was smiling in his seat, just all proud of what his quirk was, his mother would then grab his hand before telling Izuku it's time to go, as they would then walk back to their house. After that day, Izuku would arrive back in school as he would be excited to show everyone his quirk, as he would then tell everyone to gather around, as he would then show everyone his quirk, as water would start spitting out of his hands in just a short jet like it was a hose, as many of them would look on, just, cool, Izuku, so you have a water quirk? As Izuku would shake his head. What do you mean, Izuku? We just saw water come out of your hands. Hey, can anyone show me their quirk? As some of the older people in the class would show Izuku's quirk, one of them being Katsuki Bakugo, who just a couple of weeks ago had awakened his explosion quirk, as Bakugo would show Izuku's explosion quirk, just boasting about how it was going to be the best and he was going to be the #1 hero, as Izuku would then put his hands in the exact same, just formation that Bakugo had, as explosions would start to ignite out of Izuku's hands, as Bakugo would look on in shock before yelling for Izuku to stop copying his quirk, you copycat, as Izuku would just sort of laugh. Oh, come on, Bakugo. I'm just using your quirk. Imitation is quite the form of flattery, as Bakugo would just look on towards Izuku, who had just used some big words, as Izuku would just be smiling down this, as many of the kids in the class would just say, "Whoa, Izuku, what is your quirk?" Izuku would then tell them that he has a quirk called Perfect Copy, and he can copy almost anything and everything, as they would just nod their heads, as Izuku would just say, "Yeah, it's kind of a cool quirk after all, I can pretty much do many things." As a couple of months would end up passing, as many people would grow to be great friends with Izuku, as Bakugo would also be there in the class. Everyone had learned how powerful the two quirks are, as they just grew to have many friends throughout the entire school. As Izuku was doing this, he would end up walking out to the playground one day, as it was time for Izuku to be picked up by his mom. However, his mother was 5 minutes late, as Izuku was just sitting out on a bench, as he would then turn to go over and play at the playground. As Izuku was doing this, he would see a small girl with brown hair, as Izuku would see Bakugo standing over her. "Oh, so you have some sort of gravity quirk? So weak. Let me just show you whose place you are in this world. Below me, after all." As Bakugo would slam his hand into his fist, as explosions would ignite out of it. As Bakugo would raise his hand up in the air to explode, Izuku would grab Bakugo's wrist, as Izuku would glare deeply at Bakugo. "Bakugo, what are you doing? We were just taught not to bully people. Why are you doing this?" As Bakugo would then shove Izuku's hand off of him before yelling at Izuku. "Can't you see, Izuku? Both of us have some of the strongest quirks I've ever seen. We're the top of society. We shouldn't have to deal with these mutts of people. They're worthless. They should be at the They should be working for us, Izuku, underneath our feet forever. As Izuku would glare back at Bakugo before yelling at Bakugo that his ideals have been twisted by his gigantic ego and that he needs to learn something. As Bakugo would then run off as Izuku would put his hand down towards the girl. Hi, my name's Izuku Midoriya. Yours? The girl would grab Izuku's hand as Izuku would pull her up. Oh, my name's Uchaku Uraka. Thanks for saving me. Izuku would just say no problem, as his mother would then honk the horn, signifying that she had just arrived. Izuku would look, realizing that his mother was there, as he would then rush over to the car, hopping in, as his mother would then help him with the car seat that he had put in. Well, I see you've made quite the friend, Izuku. Which you did. I guess you stopped some bullying going on. Great work, Izuku. You gotta always remember to be kind to others, and others will be kind back to you. It's one of the most important things, to always be nice. Izuku would nod his head, as Inko had just given Izuku a small lesson. As many years would end up passing, Izuku would learn how his quirk would become great for hero work. He had studied very deeply about how to become a hero, and even wrote down other people's quirks that he had even been able to copy, as Izuku had a complete database where he would look into his book and read out every single quirk that he had ever copied. As Izuku had learned something, he had forgotten about a quirk after a month of having it, and when he remembered it, it was gone. He couldn't use it again. So Izuku came up with the thought that if he forgets about a quirk, it completely just disappears from his database, and he cannot use it until he copies it again. So he'd copy down all of the quirks. He'd copy and read over them and realize what they were, just making sure it was embedded in his memory, at least for the quirks he wanted to keep. Izuku would also realize that since he has a copy quirk, his quirk, if he has an explosion quirk and he's going up against Bakugo, who has the same explosion quirk, he's going to need to know the weaknesses. And so Izuku would spend every night he would get home studying about the weaknesses of all of the different quirks that there could be. If there was a fire quirk, he would know that there needed to be a water quirk. If there was a water quirk, he would know there'd have to be the weakness to the fire or the water quirk. As Izuku would study all of this, making sure he had many of the weaknesses and strengths against other things, so that they could easily be able to defeat as many people as possible. Izuku was dead center on becoming the number one hero, and he knew he had to train for it. As Izuku would walk into class, as he would then sit down right next to his best friend, Uraraka. After Izuku had saved her that day, they had become quite close friends, Izuku even inviting her over to his house, as they ended up growing fond of each other, as they were just best friends. As Bakugo would end up continuing on bullying, however, each time Izuku would be there to stop him. And finally, Izuku would end up putting Bakugo down into his place. As Izuku would see Bakugo bullying a quirkless kid, as Izuku just finally had enough. Izuku was now 10 years old, and he had been sick of seeing Bakugo bully people for the past 6 years. And so Izuku would only decide to physically act on it instead of just focusing on words. As Izuku would punch Bakugo square in the face, as Bakugo would then turn angrily towards Izuku. What the hell, copycat? Why did you do that? Izuku and just glared at Bakugo. Bakugo, when will you learn? Bullying's never the answer. Have you been so blind? And you say you want to become the number one hero someday. Would a hero do this to the same people your age? It doesn't matter if you have a powerful quirk or not. You're still a person. You're still a human being. Stop being blinded by your ego, Bakugo. Never have to say this to someone. You're completely blind, Bakugo. I couldn't believe you're trying to become a hero. If you keep acting like this, you're gonna fall down into a path of villainy, the complete opposite of what you want to become. As Bakugo would glare at Izuku before shoving him off, much like he had done when Izuku had grabbed his wrist all those years ago, as Bakugo would rush off back to his house, as he would then sit down on his bed, just looking back at all of Izuku's words. Was he really becoming a bully? Bakugo's ego had completely blinded him and couldn't manage to see what his actions were doing. As Bakugo would then finally realize that all of these actions weren't right, finally becoming a smarter person, as Bakugo would then give up his life of bullying. We cut a couple years in the future as it's Izuku, Bakugo, and Uraraka's final day of middle school. As all of them would be sitting down, Izuku would just be thinking, I wonder how hard the UA entrance exam's gonna be. As one of the person would turn around sitting in front of Izuku before asking him, "Oh, Izuku, you're hoping to get into UA? That's quite cool. I didn't really think I could make it, since my quirk's quite a bit weaker than you guys." As Izuku would then just frown. "Come on, you gotta at least try. If you don't try, you're just not even gonna make it at all. What's the difference if you try and not make it or you don't try and don't make it? You should at least try and have that tiny chance of making it. It's quite the bad idea, just quite the bad thought to not even try when you could still get a chance of making it. You might even make it into the general studies courses, maybe, even if you don't make the hero course." As the person would nod, smiling at Izuku before thanking him, as they would then be seen as the teacher would walk in. "Hello, class. Today we are going to be finding out which high schools you all want to go to. I've seen some of the paperwork that you all have submitted, and I'm going to give you the time to either change it or dead center on it. So far, we have 3 people wanting to go to UA so far. Uraraka, Bakugo, and Midoriya. Congratulations, you two, completely finalizing on the paperwork to take the entrance exam for UA. It's quite the prestigious school after all. I wish you all luck in making it." Bakugo, Izuku, and Uraraka would all thank the teacher, as many of the students would just whisper to each other, saying how, yeah, they're most likely gonna make it. They're the strongest kids in the school. As the 3 had formed a strong bond together, as they had all started to train their quirk each together. As Izuku had found a beach completely just destroyed by trash, as they had been training together by lifting up the trash and throwing it into dumps, as their parents had helped fund them by buying them dumpsters to throw all the trash into, as they worked together to completely clear the beach, as there was even just a small plaque with all 3 of their names on it, saying that this beach was dedicated to them after they cleaned the beach up completely. As they all 3 knew that if they were going to make it to UA, they were going to make it together. As all of this was happening, the final bell would ring as everyone would rush out the door, as Izuku would collect his things, as both of them would end up following Izuku out. "Well, guys, you ready for the entrance exam? All we have is 10 months left to train our absolute hardest, and then it's finally time to wait and see if we made it or not." As Bakugo would then smile, "Yep, I know damn well we're gonna make it. We have the 3 strongest quirks I've ever heard of." As Izuku would then just laugh. "Well, I wish you all luck," as they would then split in different ways and go different paths back to their house. As Izuku would be walking under a bridge back to his house, as all of a sudden a massive sewer drain would end up exploding and hitting the ceiling of the bridge. "Oh my, what do we have here? A child all for me, just for the taking." Izuku would turn around, completely being blindsided by the sludge villain, as the sludge villain would completely overtake Izuku's body, sending sludge flowing down Izuku's throat. As Izuku would completely just not know what to do, being blindsided by this entire thing. As Izuku would start to search his memory, thinking of anything that he could use, anything weak that could defeat the sludge villain, anything that would be strong against it, and the sludge was weak against him. But he couldn't think of anything. As Izuku would finally realize, maybe if he started just filling up the sludge villain with water, it could pop. As Izuku would slowly start to fill the sludge villain up with water, as the water would slowly just flow out of Izuku's hands. As Izuku getting weaker and weaker as his breath was diminishing even further, his water would slowly start to just stop coming out of his hands, as the sludge villain would then laugh. "Oh, so you have a weak little water quirk. Quite interesting. No wonder you were so easy for me to take over." However, that water had created a cavity within the sludge of the sludge villain, so if anything were to contact it at a certain way, it would completely destroy the sludge villain, causing it to explode. And just as Izuku's luck, a shining yellow golden figure would appear out of the sewer, as All Might would then wrap his fist together before he would wind his hand back, Detroit Smash! All Might would yell, slamming his fist into the sludge, as the sludge villain would then pop, exploding sludge and sewer water everywhere, as Izuku would then start to gasp for air, coughing out the little bits of sludge that remained inside of his throat. As he was coughing, he would end up looking up towards All Might before he would say, All Might, you're the #1 hero. I've wanted to be like you since I was a child. As All Might would then just laugh. Yeah, a lot of people be like me. So, sorry it took so long to get here. So, young man, are you all right? Izuku would nod his head as he would then reach into his backpack, grabbing a spare sheet of paper. Hey, can you sign this in three different parts? My friends would have loved to meet you, and I know they love your signature. As All Might would then just say, sure, grabbing a pen out of Izuku's hand, writing his signature in 3 different spots, as he would hand the paper back to Izuku, as Izuku would look on, just in complete awe. As All Might would then say, goodbye for now, young man, as he would jump off, exploding into the near distance, as Izuku would look on, just in complete shock. However, All Might had neglected to do one thing. He hadn't collected the sludge villain. As the sludge would slowly start to collect together, All Might had collected some of it, but he didn't collect all of it. So the sludge villain would slowly start to collect together as sludge would end up coming out of the sewer as well, collecting, forming back into the sludge villain. However, by the time it was all together, Izuku was long gone. And just someone's luck, Izuku hadn't been there and Bakugo had, as he would end up being walking down a different alley as he would end up seeing some weird goo around his foot. As he would start to shake his foot violently, as all of a sudden the sludge would end up seeping out of every little crack within the alleyway. As Bakugo would just wonder, what the hell is this stuff? As he would get onto his hands, as he would start to leap up over onto his arm and up into his shoulder, as he would start to grab hold of Bakugo's jaw, opening it open as Bakugo would start to struggle even more. What the hell is happening? As the sludge villain would finally materialize out of nowhere, going down attacking Bakugo much like he had to Izuku. As Izuku would end up walking back to his house, he would end up hearing an explosion from back behind him. As Izuku would look on behind him, he would end up seeing Bakugo, or he would end up seeing a massive explosion as a crowd would end up forming. As Izuku would rush over, he would end up seeing Bakugo entrapped by the sludge. As Izuku would end up realizing what was happening. Why aren't you guys saving him? You're pro-heroes after all, Izuku would say towards the pro-heroes at the front. We can't save him right now, it's too dangerous, we'd be harming many more people. As Izuku would hop over the guardrail before looking back, saying that he'll take his hand. He'll do it then, as Izuku would rush over, as Bakugo would be motioning for Izuku to get out of there. However, Izuku just couldn't let his friend die, as Izuku would activate Uraraka's quirk, touching the sludge villain around it. It kind of worked, as Izuku touching some of the sludge, it would start to float up into the air. As the sludge villain would be floating up, Izuku would grab Bakugo's leg, causing him to float up as well, whereas Izuku would yank him out of the sludge, as the now weightless Bakugo was easily being able to get out of there. As the sludge would end up falling down to the ground, as Izuku would yell, release, Bakugo would be out the sludge, as Izuku would grab Bakugo, yanking him back as Bakugo was about to turn around and explode the sludge villain into tiny little pieces. As the sludge villain would end up staring on as the pro heroes would finally move in, taking down the sludge villain. However, it wasn't the pro heroes there. All Might had saw it and got in its way, punching the sludge villain, completely destroying it, as he would then finally collect it. However, when he would end up looking for Izuku, who had saved him and Bakugo were long gone, as they had decided to get home, as Bakugo would just say, look, I gotta go, I'm gonna be in trouble if I'm a bit more late, as both of them would end up scurrying off, as they knew they would get in quite the bit of trouble since both of their parents had texted them that they were meeting for dinner, and if any of them were late, they would get their butts kicked. And so when they would finally open the door, both their parents would be staring, oh, what made you two so damn late? As Izuku would rush over to the TV, dodging Mitsuki and his mother, grabbing the remote, turning the TV on, as the news would end up being playing, showing a replay of Izuku rushing in, saving Bakugo from a sludge villain. As both of their parents would just say, oh, okay. as 10 months of the 3 training would end up passing. So they would all be walking into the entrance exam together. They would then say, so, who do you think's gonna have the highest score out of all of us? That's quite the question. I don't think it'd be me, though. You two have quite the more powerful quirk than I do. Come on, Uraraka, don't say that. I think you have just as good of a chance as either of us do to get the highest score. As Uraraka would just sort of, yeah, I guess so. As they would then walk into the auditorium where they would then be explaining what the written exam was by the hero present Mike. So, anyway, I have just passed out all of the papers for the written exam. You all have 3 hours to complete it, and anyone who does not complete it in those 3 hours will be automatically failed. As all of the students would be scrambling to just be able to pass the test, as many of them would get done in the test in under an hour. As many of them would be saying, oh no, I rushed, I know I'm gonna fail now. As Izuku had decided to take his sweet time, knowing that the threat of if anyone didn't finish within the time limit, it was just a threat to make people rush. As Izuku knew the test wasn't that big, and as soon as you ended up finishing it, you couldn't go back and just look over your answers, as the test was over a computer, and as soon as you clicked the final submit question, it was done. That way, if you don't do it, you could go back and look through everything. You can just look through it, and so Izuku took his sweet merry time. So as everyone would end up finishing, President Mike would end up explaining the next part of the exam, the hero exam. Izuku couldn't wait to do it, as they would all be handed out cards. It either had a B, or a C on it. Depending on what the letter was, that would be what city you were going to go to. As President Mike would end up explaining it, everyone had 30 minutes to make their way to the cities that they were in, being given a pamphlet map. All 3 of them would end up meeting together, showing their cards. Both Izuku and Uraraka were in City A, while Bakugo was in City B. Izuku and them would split ways, as Izuku and Uraraka would wish Bakugo luck, as Bakugo would wish them luck as well. They would all walk to where they were going, as Izuku would walk up to the Uraraka, who had decided to get there as soon as she could, wanting time to stretch. However, a shoulder would be planted on his, or a hand would be planted on his shoulder. I think that girl's trying to focus. I suggest you don't try to hurt her focus in any way. You could possibly cause her to fail this exam. Izuku would look back at the person who had grabbed his shoulder. However, by the time he did, he would end up seeing in the very corner of his eye that the door had opened, as Izuku would get down and do a stance, launching off into past everyone, as Uraraka would do the same. Many of the people there would just sort of laugh. Oh, look at those two. They're going to be disqualified after doing something like that. As Izuku would end up hearing some of them talking, as he would hear them saying, oh, they're going to get disqualified or something. However, after they had said that, President Mike would come over the intercom. What are you two mumbling about? Go, go! Didn't you ever hear heroes don't wait for someone to tell them to start? You gotta be able to just start saving anyone as soon as possible. You can't be waiting for someone to motion for you to go. As all of them would just hop up, scrambling to jump off into the distance, as by the time they had, Uraraka had already destroyed many robots along with Izuku, knowing that Bakugo's quirk with the explosions would work quite well for this, exploding many of their robots into sheer just tiny little bits, pieces, as just robot metal and parts would be flying all over the place, as Izuku would continue on rushing off, as Uraraka and Izuku had decided to use their quirks together, as Uraraka would touch the robots, barely dodging any of the attacks, where they would then float up, as Izuku would then slam his hands together, sending massive explosions, destroying massive amounts of robots. Uraraka knew that it was going to be hard for the robots to just be destroyed after hitting the ground from a short fall, and so with the combined help of Izuku, their quirks paired quite well, as Nezu would end up reading over their profiles. Ochako Uraraka, Quirk, Gravity, and Izuku Midoriya, Quirk, Perfect Copy. So, they figured out how to use their quirks quite well. It appears the Izuku kid copied a kid by the name of Bakugo Katsuki's quirk, his quirk being some sort of explosion thing. As Nezu would be talking. Izuku would continue on exploding. However, somewhere in between that, both Izuku and Uraraka had gotten separated. As Izuku would continue on just exploding robots, all of a sudden he would end up hearing 5 minutes left, as rumbling would end up being heard. Izuku would look to the ground, seeing it shake violently, thinking, what the hell? Is this an earthquake? As Izuku would look up to see a massive robot towering over him, as he would end up seeing it in the distance, Uraraka was standing there just looking up at the massive robot. As Uraraka would end up hearing, along with Izuku, a massive cry for help. As Izuku would rush over to where Uraraka was, as she would end up asking Izuku, did you hear that? Yeah, I did. It sounds like someone was yelling for help. As both of them would look on towards, they would see a black-haired girl stuck in the rubble right in the path of the Zero-Pointer robot, as the just commotion and earthquakeness of the slams of the feet of the robot had caused part of the building to fall apart, slamming down onto a girl. As Izuku would rush off, yelling that he'll buy time for the robot, and Uraraka should go and rescue the person, knowing that Uraraka wanted to become a rescue hero after all. As this takes us back to when Uraraka, Bakugo, and Izuku were training. They were training with one of them being stuck under rubble, while one of them was basically using their quirk to hold back imaginary villains, while one of them would go in and save the person under rubble. Since Uraraka had just told them she wanted to become the greatest rescue hero, while Izuku and Bakugo wanted to become a hero that could defeat many villains while also saving others. So they decided to pair this with their training, whereas Uraraka would get great at rescuing, as both Izuku, Bakugo, and Uraraka just trained their quirks as well. So Izuku would jump off, exploding with his hands, sending him flying up in the air. He would wind his hand back, slamming it into the faceplate of the robot, sending the biggest explosion Izuku could manage, as the robot would end up falling backwards from the forward momentum of the explosion. As the robot would be falling backwards, Izuku would fall down, as he would use his explosions to lighten and slow down his fall. Izuku would be breathing heavily. He would then thank Uraraka for saving her while he destroyed the robot. As then see the girl who would thank both of them, as the test would be told that it had ended. As Izuku would be walking out, they would meet up with Bakugo, as they would then just be telling each other how they did, as all three of them said, well, I guess we're all gonna make it. As all of them would be walking back to their houses, where they would then part ways, waiting for their letter to arrive in the mail. However, Izuku's letter would arrive early. It had said that there was another kid with a copy quirk, and that Izuku needs to come in to UA so that they can measure it. Izuku would think, strange, I thought I did quite well, show that I'm the best. I thought copy quirks were quite rare. I guess someone also has it. As Izuku would be walking in it to UA, he would end up walking in it to see someone who was a blonde-haired person. As Izuku would see this just small bear-looking thing, as Izuku would put his hand out. I'm assuming you're Nezu. Nezu would shake Izuku's hand. Yes, and I'm assuming you're Izuku. This here is Nama. He has a copy quirk. Now, I know you have a quirk called Perfect Copy, which sounds like it's better than every way than this kid. But I'll be giving you 5 minutes to prove to me that you're better than this kid. So why don't you start? As Onuma would then just start telling Nezu how he's so much easier and better than Izuku would ever be, and how he should be put into the hero program. However, Izuku would walk to Onuma before just looking at him. I'm guessing you didn't catch the hint, Nezu said. As Izuku would wind back his fist, punching Onuma across the face, as Izuku would then see Onuma holding his cheek in his hand. What the hell was that for? As Izuku would look over, just with a blatant look back at Nezu, as Nezu would just sort of sigh. Alright, that gives me everything I need to know. You boys can go home. As Izuku would be walking home, he would end up asking his mother about if there was anyone she had heard about, any other person with a copy quirk. Just like Izuku, she was completely clueless. So I guess there's someone else with a copy quirk in your same grade. That's kind of cool. Are you guys friends at all? Izuku would just sort of sigh. well, I had to basically fight him to see who would be put in the highest hero program. He didn't put up much of a fight at all, so I'm guessing I'm in the highest program. A week later, Izuku would get a letter in the mail as he would wait to open it with the rest of his friends. So they would end up meeting up at Izuku's house, where they would be sitting in Izuku's bedroom as all of them would open the letter. As would then be told all simultaneously, "Congratulations, young UA students. You all have made it into Class 1A. Now, as it would start, Izuku Midori, Bakugo Katsuki, Uchaka Uraraka. As it would then read out, Izuku got first, Bakugo had second amount of points, and Uraraka in third. Congratulations for making it into UA High School. As all three of them would then explode, as Izuku would barely throw them out of his window as they would explode in the air right as Izuku did that. They would congratulate each other. Well, guys, it looks like we're going to be seeing a lot more of each other now that we're finally back in a classroom together, as they would then all sort of laugh. Well, yeah, I guess so. As all of that was happening, Izuku ended up going down, hearing that dinner was ready, as they would then go and eat dinner together. After that, all of them would be mailed a UA uniform that matched their size perfectly. As the next day would happen, it was their first day of school. Izuku would put on his UA uniform, as he would then head off into the direction of UA, getting a ride from his mother, as he would end up being dropped off at the gates of UA, as he would end up being just waiting for his friends to arrive. Once they did, they would all greet each other, congratulating each other one last time, as they would then walk in to the school of their dreams. They made it. They are now in the hero program and they can't wait. As Izuku would walk in, he would marvel at the beauty of the UA campus. Man, this place is awesome. I can't wait to be a student here. As all three of them would just sort of laugh. Walking in, they would sit down at their desk, just waiting for the teacher to arrive. They were the first three to get there, as they would end up looking outside as clouds would end up starting to form. Well, it looks like it's going to be a gloomy day today, Izuku would say. So all three of them would be sitting just in a row together, with Izuku in just the front, Uraraka next to him, and Bakugo was in front of Izuku. Izuku was sitting behind Bakugo, so it kind of looked like an L with Bakugo on top, Izuku below him, and Uraraka next to Izuku. So they would end up looking outside as Izuku and Bakugo got window seats. They would see thunder and lightning in the distance. Well, I guess it's not going to be the brightest day here. As all of this would end up being happening, finally everyone would end up arriving, as they would all sit down, just commotion, greeting each other and all that. Quiet down, quiet down. It took you all 8 minutes to shut up. That's the worst I've ever seen from a Class 1A. Well, anyway, I'm your I'm your teacher and homeroom teacher, Shotaizawa. You may know me as the hero Eraserhead, but who cares with introductions anyway? Since it's raining, we can't go outside to test all of your quirks, so we might as well do a bit more of training inside the gym. What about the introductions and the whole speech by Nezu? That doesn't matter. You're Class 1A. We're heroes. You are the next generation of heroes, after all. I really could care less about some introduction from Nezu. Plus, I'm the Class 1A hero teacher. I can do whatever I want that best fits my students. So, why don't you all put your PE uniforms on? I'll leave it up to you for you all to find the key to the locker rooms and put your uniform on for all of your lockers. And then I want you to go down and meet me in the gym. Well, there's multiple gyms. I'll leave it up to you to find it. Whoever's last there, I'll leave it up to the class to see if you'll be expelled. It also determines on how you participate in the 1v1s we'll be doing, as all of them would end up running off, as Izuku would end up finding the key easily, having read about how there was an entire key room where Izuku would find the keys, as Izuku would grab all three of his friends' keys, as Izuku would run off, giving Bakugo and Uraraka their keys to their locker, as both of them would all just make it to their lockers the quickest, where they would then get changed and head off looking for the gyms. As Izuku would end up being texting his friends saying, "Alright, Gym A, he's not in here," as they would all just be walking around looking at all the sorts of gyms, where finally Izuku would find it, calling his friends, telling them that it was Gym B that he was in. So they would end up getting there. Sawa would look down at his stopwatch. "Wow, that's record time. I guess you all be the first 3 fights, but of course, since you all made it using teamwork, I guess I'll have to do something else." As all of this would end up being happening, 20 minutes would pass as finally the rest of the class would end up arriving. "You all are late. That doesn't matter anyway. So, here's what we're gonna be doing. We are going to be doing a team fight. I decided not to do a 1v1 fight since mostly Hero Work's about teamwork after all. So, who wants to be on a team? Like I'd make you decide. So, the first 3 people that made it here will be on a team, and then you 3 will make it on a team." I would signal towards Todoroki, Momo, and Kaminari. As all of them would end up being happening, Izawa would split the gym in half, as he would then tell all of the rest of the students to go sit in bleachers, where they would then look down as Izawa would begin the fight. "Alright, you may now begin. Whoever wins is by knocking out the 3 other teams or capturing them by using this capture tape," Izawa would say, handing out this sort of tape that would be used to capture others. As all of this would be happening, the fight would begin, as Izuku would end up looking back at his 2 teammates, as Todoroki would start this by slamming his foot down onto the ground, sending a massive iceberg flying off towards Izuku. As Izuku, who had actually been in person to a fight of Endeavor's with a villain, Izuku would use Endeavor's Quirk, sending fire, completely decimating the ice that Todoroki had sent. As Todoroki, not being discouraged, would send another iceberg slamming down towards Izuku's team. However, Izuku would easily disperse of this again, as steam would end up filling the air of the gym. As Izuku would use this and signal for his 2 teammates to go and move out, as Kaminari would end up seeing both of them rush off towards him to capture him, as they had deemed him the weakest of the 2. As Izuku had seen what the 2 people's quirks were, being Momo and Todoroki, he had heard of what their quirks were and deemed that Kaminari's electricity would kind of be weaker than Momo and Todoroki's, so they should take out the weakest first, since Kaminari is just the weakest and would pose sort of a threat if he were to get in their way. So they would take Kaminari out very quickly, as Kaminari would end up electrocuting himself, as the tape would end up bouncing the attack back at Kaminari, as he would then just be looking dumb just at the people that had captured him, as they would throw Kaminari off towards Izawa, who would then catch him. As finally the steam would clear, leaving both Momo and Todoroki to stare on at Izuku's team. "So I guess you guys got the yellow-haired one," Todoroki would mutter before jumping off, rushing over towards Izuku, sending icicles flying towards him, as Todoroki had managed to put ice around his fist, throwing punches towards Izuku. However, Izuku would dodge all of these before Izuku would copy Todoroki's attacks the exact way he had done, putting ice around his fist, as Izuku would slam his ice fist into Todoroki's face before he would put fire around his other fist, slamming it into Todoroki's chin, sending an uppercut behind. "Why aren't you using your fire, Todoroki? I know you have another fire quirk besides just your ice, so why aren't you using it? You're half as strong as you would be if you were." Todoroki would glare up towards Izuku, saying that he's never gonna use that bastard's quirk. It's his father's quirk and not his. He'll never use it, as Izuku would just sort of laugh. "Come on, Todoroki. It's your quirk. You're the one who can control your fire, not him. Why are you saying that it's his quirk, even though it's technically yours? You may have gotten it from genetics from your father, but that doesn't matter." As a Todoroki, a light bulb would just ignite in his brain, as all of a sudden fire would explode off from him. However, it would be immediately just destroyed, as the human fire extinguisher, Izuku, would spray Todoroki down, sending a wave of water barreling towards Todoroki as this wave would crash into him like a tsunami, sending him flying backwards as his head would hit against the padded wall, as Bakugo would then appear from the blindsided Todoroki, slamming his two fists down into Todoroki's cheeks, sending explosions out. As Uraraka was doing this, she was fighting with Momo, grabbing onto Momo's bow staff, pushing Momo back. With all the strength training Uraraka had done with both Izuku and Bakugo, this was no sweat to her, as she would end up picking up the bow staff, sending Momo flying backwards, releasing it, tossing her into the bleachers, as she would end up falling down before Aizawa would stop the match there. That's enough. I've seen enough. Congratulations, Team Izuku, Bakugo, and Uraraka. You have won this fight. As all of them would cheer out, congratulating each other, as Izuku would just give some credit to the other team as well, just saying that they were lacking in teamwork, even though that's one of the most important parts of being a hero. Still, this is their first day, after all, in UA, so they haven't had the possible training that the three of us have had, Izuku would say. As Aizawa would sort of nod before giving the next team a round to go and just start their fight, as the next teams would end up coming out of the bleachers and starting their fight, as Izuku's team would just sit there watching. After everyone had gone, Aizawa would look down at a paper where he had written down notes on all of the fights. Yeah, we're gonna need to work on your team abilities. You can't be heroes without being able to work with anyone and everyone that you end up meeting as a hero. If you're not gonna be able to work like this, you're not gonna be able to become a hero. So over the next 2 weeks, we'll be working on team building activities, so you earn everyone and gain a sort of trust with them. Like an example of Izuku, Bakugo, and Uraraka. I'm guessing that they've been friends for quite a while, so that's why they were easily able to win the fight in under 3 minutes. So, yeah, you all can go home for now. Weeks would end up passing as all of them had been working on teamwork and all of those sorts of things, as finally it was their first hero class, as it was scheduled for today, as all of them would be sitting in their seats wondering, I wonder what we're going to be doing today. It's our first true hero class. As whispers would erupt around the room, as everyone would just be talking, just spreading rumors about what they heard was going to happen. As all of them would be talking, all of a sudden they would hear stomping from down the hall. Hello, class! It is I, All Might! As all of a sudden their sliding door would be smashed in, and bits of drywall and the door flying back into the wall behind it. Hello, class. I know all of you know it's your first hero class today, and it might just make you even more excited about becoming a hero to know that your hero teacher's All Might. As everyone would look on in shock, as many people would jump up saying, Whoa, it's All Might! I can't believe it! You're the #1 hero! Many of them would say, as All Might would just sort of laugh, Yup, it's me, All Might. So anyways, class, after Midnight helped you all design your hero costumes, the support course, you then got to test some of their abilities making your hero costumes. So here you all go. As All Might would then press a red button, as hero costumes would end up coming out of a wall, as costumes would be in briefcases that had a number assigned to them. As earlier that morning, Aizawa had put numbers all on the desk, as they would be looking at their desk. As everyone who's wondering what the numbers meant, as All Might would finally give them what they wanted. Those numbers on your desk represent the number of your briefcase. Whichever number represents the briefcase has your hero costume in it. You can't be heroes without costumes, of course. You'll be figuring out your hero name around halfway through this year, so don't sweat about that. Although I do suggest thinking about what your hero name should be, as everyone would just be nodding their heads, as they would all be sitting down wondering what was going to be happening. As all of this happening, All Might would then tell them, Alright, you all can get up, grab your briefcases, and head down to the locker rooms. Please get changed quite quickly. I wouldn't have to make a lot of people wait, since we are going to be doing another team activity. Aizawa wanted to see how far your teamwork abilities have gone since the first day here at your hero school. So we're going to be doing a teamwork activity called the Heroes vs. Villains assignment. How this works is two teams will face off against each other of two. These two people will either be on a team of the heroes or of the villains. The villains will be going into a just building to hide a paper mache device, courtesy of the support course, of course, and the heroes will have 15 minutes to find that device or capture all of the villains. So please head back down to the locker rooms, get changed, and go to City Site C, as that is where I'm going to be waiting for you all. As all of this would be happening, all of the students would rush off in pure excitement as they couldn't hold their just happiness and excitement, as it was their first hero class after all. They just couldn't wait, as all of them would finally make their way down to where it was after getting changed into their hero costume. All Might would then sort of laugh. Wow, that's quite record time. I see all of you are quite excited to start your journey as a hero. So I already decided what the first two teams were going to be, as I saw what had actually helped me decide that. As I saw was actually here gonna be watching you too, since he did make the notes for what happened on the first day. So the first team will be Izuku and Bakugo versus Uraraka and, let me think here, Ida. As this would be happening, both Izuku and Bakugo would end up walking over to each other as Izuku would start to think of a plan. So since Ida has sort of a speed quirk and Uraraka's gravity quirk, I think we should possibly try to stay our distance, as Ida could quite easily outspeed us, and get to us quite quickly. So if we keep our distance, he's not going to be able to attack. And since Uraraka needs to touch us in order to make us anti-gravity, she's not going to be too much of use if she's at a distance either. So all of this would be happening. All Might would hand the villain team the device and tell them they have 5 minutes to head in to the building. As Izuku and Bakugo were thinking of their plan, All Might would tell them that the 5 minutes for the villain team had expired and that they may now head into the building. Izuku would put his hand out in front of Bakugo. They probably put it up on the top floor. I suggest we go up to the roof, but we'd have to find a quiet way to do this. As Izuku would end up just activating his frog quirk that he had copied from Asui, as he would end up telling Bakugo to grab onto his back, as he would then stick his hands onto the wall, as he would then slowly climb up the wall, as Asui would end up watching that. Well, I guess he copied my quirk after all. I think that's quite a useful way to use it, being able to get on top of the roof, as all of them would be watching the fight as they would then make it up to the top. I think we should blindside them and just make sure they don't know we're coming. If we're able to attack them without their knowledge, it'd be quite easy for us to win. As Bakugo would nod his head, as Izuku would then activate an ice quirk that he had copied from Todoroki, as Izuku would put his hand down on the roof, as ice particles would end up forming around Izuku's hand, as Izuku would end up jolting his hand forward, as a massive just iceberg would end up appearing just out of nowhere, as Ida and Uraraka would look on in shock, being completely overwhelmed by the ice. So that should take care of them, as Izuku would tell Bakugo to explode the roof, as Bakugo would do so. As chunks of roof would fly just in every direction, they would end up seeing a small divot in the massive ice chunk that Izuku had formed. As Izuku would just sort of laugh. That's my bad, I probably shouldn't have gone for such a strong type of ice. As Izuku would start to just use his fire quirk as a flamethrower to destroy the ice, melting it around, as finally the ice would be all melted, leaving Ida and Uraraka still shocked, as both Izuku and Bakugo would jump in, completely just taking them out, grabbing them by their necks, knocking them out with ease, tying them up, as both Izuku and Bakugo would touch the hands on the device. As All Might would come over the intercom and congratulations, Team Heroes! Please carry Team Villains back up to us. As both Izuku and Bakugo would grab two people, carrying them back up, as Recovery Girl who's on site would check them, making sure that they were okay. All Might would ask anybody if they could tell what the two had done very well, as Momo would raise her hand, saying that they had done quite well in the teamwork aspect, as it still shows that they have the extensive knowledge of how to be a team. As All Might would just sort of laugh, saying, yeah, I guess it really does show who's been just friends for quite a while and who's been using their quirks together after quite a long time. As every one of the teams would end up finishing, All Might would end up walking into the classroom after dismissing everyone, as Izuku was still sitting there talking with both Bakugo and Uraraka. All Might would wait for their conversation to end, as they would stand up saying hello All Might before walking out back to their class, or back to their house, as Izuku would stand up with them. However, All Might would stop him. Hello, young Midoriya. I actually have a question for you. I've been meaning to ask you, as I haven't seen you in quite a while. As Izuku would look on, just with a look of confusion towards All Might. What do you mean, All Might? I remember seeing you that day after saving you from the sludge villain. I remember seeing you save young Bakugo Katsuki from such sludge villain. As All Might would end up bringing Izuku back to his private office, where he would then sit him down, pouring a cup of tea. I've been meaning to ask you, Izuku. Do you think you could become my successor? Izuku would look confused at All Might, saying, your successor? What do you mean? As Izuku would sort of catch the hint. You know, All Might, you can't just give someone your quirk. That's not possible. As All Might would just sort of awkwardly laugh. Well, it kind of is possible with my quirk. As Izuku would look on confused. What do you mean? This is confusing me, All Might. As All Might would just say, so, I'll give you the story. Many years ago, a man was born with a quirk called All for One, allowing him to steal quirks of others while also giving those quirks to other people. This caused him to build up an army of supporters after helping them with their endeavors. And so, he ended up being a very villainous person. For his brother was said to be quirkless, however he had a useless quirk that allowed him to pass quirks on to others. And so his brother gave him a stockpiling quirk, and the two quirks merged, and that gave us all, one for all, my quirk, and it's been passed on for generations trying to stop All for One, and I believe you can be the person to do it. Izuku would think long and hard before shaking his head. I don't think I can do that, All Might. There's probably someone much more in need of that quirk, and right now, I don't think I need it. I'd possibly become too arrogant if I were to become so much strong. With something like that, being a quirk like that, I don't think I could take it, as I already have quite the powerful quirk after all, and I just don't think I need it. As All Might would look sadly down at Izuku before saying he'll give him some time to think about it, as it's quite the tough decision. Izuku would nod his head. However, Izuku, before he would walk out, he would turn to All Might. You know, All Might, I could help you find someone who would be quite useful to the quirk and would possibly be able to use the quirk to a much fuller extent. As Izuku would say, I'll help you with your journey to finding someone to use your quirk, All Might. As All Might would have nodded his head, thanking Izuku, as Izuku would walk out, as he would end up walking back to his house, as his friends had met at his house actually after going to their own houses, as their parents had told them that they needed to get ready as they were all going to a dinner at the Midoriya's. As Izuku would walk in late, still wearing his UA uniform, Inko would ask where he had been. Izuku would say the teacher wanted to speak with him after class, as Izuku would sit down eating on the dinner that his mother had prepared for him. As all of them would be talking, with the parents just congratulating the three on making it into UA, and how they have heard from their teacher through emails how well they've been doing, and that they're the top of the class. As Izuku would just say, yeah, guess we've been doing quite well. It actually shows that we probably have some of the highest level of experience with teamwork there. Everyone's still kind of not well using it yet. As the parents would just sort of laugh, as all of this would end up being happening, with many of them just sharing embarrassing stories about when the kids were young. Once they had finished their dinner, they would go up to Izuku's room just to play video games and talk about what their endeavors and journeys through UA were going to be like. As finally Bakugo would end up bringing up the conversation. So, who do you think's gonna be the number one hero out of all of us? As Izuku would just sort of laugh. That's quite the question, Bakugo. I don't think any of us can answer that just yet. We're still only in our first month at UA, after all. Bakugo would just sort of laugh before urging Izuku on. Oh, come on. Please, Izuku, I know damn well you're confident you'd be the number one hero out of all of us. Well, I mean, you're not wrong about that. Since I can just copy anyone's quirk after seeing it, I could easily copy your quirk and be just as powerful as you. I could even copy a weakness of yours and do that. So that basically means I'm stronger than you. As Bakugo would then sort of just laugh. Well, don't forget you can also copy anyone's techniques after all. So I guess you would be the best out of all of us. That doesn't mean we wouldn't become one of the best hero trios after all. Zuko would nod his head as the night would end up ending, as all of them would come into school the next day, wondering what just trials and things they'd go through their next day at UA and all the different sorts of training and friends they'd end up making along the way to their path being a hero. And that is where I'm going to leave part 1 off. I hope you all did enjoy part 1 of What If Deku Had a Copy Quirk. Please put your what if suggestions down in the comments section below. I really do enjoy reading all of the suggestions from everyone, as I'm going to be reading all of the comments and maybe even replying to all of the comments on this video. So make sure you ask me any questions you have for me in the comment section, and please leave your what if suggestions down there as well. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.